I was a numbers guy. I was an alkalinity, I was a calcium, I was a magnesium. I was 100% all about those three main parameters. And um, you helped me learn that it's not necessarily those parameters that are the most important. It's something that nobody talks about, and that is pH. And that's why for the last 2 years on live streams, I've been talking about pH. Keep your suppressed pH up, and your corals will thank you for it, because my corals thank me every day for keeping my pH at 8.28 to whatever the peak is every day. And it varies depending on, because I'm an open and air environment that constantly is varying, plus, other variables that honestly, Chris, you couldn't figure them all out. I couldn't figure them all out because of the open air environment, plus all of the animals. There's so many things you're not going to know, but you're going to be able to observe them and learn a little bit by little bit and maybe figure most of this stuff out. That's the process that is probably the most exciting for me, is learning something new on a daily basis. And if that's what you're all about, um, dosing Kalkwasser and not dosing a part A, part B solution will change the way you look at everything you're doing when it comes to your reef aquarium. It'll save you time and money.
Yeah, that's something that I hope people will, viewers of these episodes, will put in the forefront.
Embrace.
Yeah, embrace it. Make if you're a reef aquarist, or if you're and you or if you are a coral aquaculture facility,
Facility.
or a researcher, or you're aspiring to become a coral aquaculture facility, have fun.
Yes.
Explore all this stuff, but please have fun. Please make this about being fun for you, because either maybe I'm reading into it a bit too much. I don't spend a lot of times on forums,
Here do I.
but I get the impression that reefing has become less about fun somewhat recently, I guess, and maybe that's been a general slide. But this is the sort of thing that, and I say this, I mean Kalkwasser application, that can be can really elicit some incredible results that I think a lot of people will poo-poo until they decide to employ them on their own systems and really
Exactly.
give an honest assessment. So, aside from growth of the corals increasing dramatically, the almost not quite doubling, but not far off it.
Darn close.
It's a pretty substantial increase. There have been changes in the methods that you use to adjust and maintain calcium and alkalinity in those systems as well. So, what were
Yes.
you doing aside from the calcium reactor? Were you dosing other supplements, solutions, whatever, dry material into the systems in order to keep calcium and alkalinity values where you wanted them in conjunction with what you were getting out of your reactor?
Yes. And that, I think, was the biggest frustrating part for me, because we had commercial calcium reactors that were rated for 5,000 gallons of water. And we're on 2,400 gallons is this calcium reactor. And my alkalinity value, I could not keep it where I wanted it to be without supplementing a dry alkalinity buffer on occasions. It wasn't something I had to do on a daily basis. But when you're running 2 liters of effluent through your calcium reactor per minute at a pH of 6.5, and you can't get enough calcium carbonate to come from that reactor, and you're melting 20 kilograms of media monthly, 2 bottles of CO2 monthly, and you're running all of that 2 liters a minute of suppressed pH, super suppressed pH, to back into your coral system, something's not right there. The problem is I have an addiction. I put corals everywhere. There was corals, there still is corals growing on the walls of my aquariums. They're growing in the sump of my aquariums. They're packed in there like sardines, because I want to be able to do as much as I can with the space that's available. And I always thought that any space that's available, it's not being utilized, is wasted space. And let's figure out what we can do and how we can incorporate a coral in that space. And we figured it out and we've done it. So the biomass was, I think, probably the biggest contributing factor to our issues with the calcium reactor not being able to keep up with our alkalinity and our calcium demand in the system. So as soon as we put the Kalkwasser on by dosing it according to what my evaporation level was. And that was a little bit tricky for me to at first to get dialed in, because open air environment, every day is different. The humidity is different on every single day of every single week of every single year down here. And I got summertime where it's so humid, I might evaporate 5 gallons of water a day. And then I got the wintertime when I might evaporate on that same system, 15 gallons of water per day. So that was really interesting and fun. Fun. I mean, seriously, fun to learn. At first, it would pulling my hair out about it, but then I'm like, I'm having fun with this. This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to stress me out. Okay, we know what we need to do. Let's just figure it out and let's get it done. So adjusting my dosage on the dose pump on the Apex was a daily occurrence for the first 6 months of me learning how to use Kalkwasser in this way. And I still have to go through. I watch the weather continuously. When the humidity level is, the barometer. I forget what it was. When the humidity level is at like 50%, I know I'm going to get a lot of evaporation. When it's above that, depending on where it is I have to adjust my dosage so that I'm not overdosing, because that is a major problem that I had the first summer we put on the Kalkwasser. So 2021, we were chasing our salinity, because we were still doing it the same way, and I was adjusting doses and still trying to figure out how to dial things in. And then it kind of came to me at the end of the summer what I needed to do, and I can get into that in another episode because that incorporates the other hydroxides that we were using, to give it a little bit more of a boost. But it's it can be a lot of fun, and if you're set on numbers because that's what the reefing community has set into your head, I'm telling you right now, and Chris will say the same thing, get those numbers out of your head. Make sure they don't fall below the numbers that you like, is all I have to say. Because incorporating Kalkwasser in your system, if it's an established system that you've been dosing with, either a part A, part B solution, or you're using a calcium reactor on, you're going to get a spike in alkalinity. There's not a system in my facility that hasn't gotten a massive spike in alkalinity, all the way up to as high as 13.6. And as a matter of fact, that system just fell below 10, and it's been over a year and a half of dosing Kalkwasser, and it's just now getting below the 10 mark. And then it goes right back up and it goes right back down. So it'll be like that probably for the next 3 months. And eventually I'll get it down to where it's down below the 9 mark. And then I'm going to have to incorporate a calcium reactor on that system for the first time in its life, because I'm not going to go back to dosing a 2-part system, because that's just more of a headache than what I need to deal with on a commercial level. And the calcium reactor just makes more sense to me, to supplement that alkalinity. So yes, to answer your question, as I went off on that whole thing, we do not supplement alkalinity anymore. I haven't put an alkalinity buffer in any system in 2 years. The only thing I have to do is at about once per month, I have to add a pretty good dose of calcium, because I don't like it to go below the 390 mark, but it goes down to like a 380, and then I'll just do a fairly decent dose, a 24-hour drip line of concentrated calcium chloride solution. And it takes about a 24-hour period of time for that 2.5-gallon bucket of concentrated to go in. And that'll take me up. I have it dialed in to where I know exactly how much to put in the solution dry, and then put it in over 24 hours. And it almost always takes me back to around that 420 mark, which I don't like to go above, because I honestly don't see a point in it. It's just, in my opinion, wasting your money, because corals can only utilize what is available to them. And if it's more available than what they can actually use, then you're just throwing money away by putting it in your system, because it's pointless.
Yeah, something that I again want to reiterate is that the purpose of this discussion and the purpose of the Reef Agriscience discussions in general is a pragmatic application of these principles on a commercial scale or on a research scale. Chris is a coral farmer. As a marine scientist, I do a lot of consulting for aquaculture folks and have done for a long, long time. But in addition to that, my wife and I raise a number of different species, or breeds of heritage waterfowl on our property. We have a small farm here, so we have a farming mentality as well. You have to do what works for the situation, the circumstances that you're in. You're not in the habit as a farmer of throwing money at projects. You're usually, if you're going to be successful, not doing that at all. You're learning as much as you possibly can from people who have done this before you. You're asking them what sorts of mistakes they've made. You are relying on them giving you an honest and friendly assessment of what's going on with their systems. Maybe you ask them, have you ever experienced what I'm experiencing right now in my system? Have you ever experienced that? What did you do? Ask questions, but remember that this is all about exploration. But again, as from a farmer's perspective, you are trying to solve problems and you are applying logic and your own experience to that. That's what Reef Agriscience is. That's what we intended all of this to be about. So
I think that's a great way to look at it. And the thing that I think is super important is we hear all this trust the science all the time, everywhere is what we've been hearing, all this trust the science. Well, I think that everybody needs to understand that science is all theory, and we are doing what we're doing. I want somebody to show me a better way. 'Cause I don't
yeah,
know if there is right now.
right.
And the there's so many ways to maintain and grow these amazing animals. Um, they're not right, they're not wrong. Some of them, in my opinion, are just a waste of time and money because of all of that we have done. And Chris, you've been working with me for 15 years almost on my water chemistry. And I mean, you remember when I had the garage days at my house, and I remember you would not sell me your salt blend at the time because I had a 55-gallon barrel to mix it up in, and I was going to be using it almost immediately. And you said, no, you can't have my salt yet. And it, the way you evolve and learn the processes, I always wanted to make it as simple as possible. And why I ever got away from dosing Kalkwasser the way I did it when I first started becoming a reef hobbyist back in the 90s is beyond me. I just went with the trends of the day. And that's the thing that you have to, as a hobbyist, you have to understand that there's so many ways to do this. You need to pick and choose the the people that you trust in this industry to give you advice on how to maintain and keep these animals thriving, not just surviving. To me, it's about thriving. It's not just surviving in your aquarium. Some people are happy with their corals just surviving. Um, I personally think that they all should be thriving. And if people do their research and do enough, and they understand that theories all that are put into play for reefing are again just theories and they are all working, but better ways are available. And if somebody tells you that, say, a 3-part, 2-part solution is better than doing what we're doing, I'm going to have to come back and say it works for you,
That hasn't been my experience,
but
but
I've been there and I've done that. And we were looking for better. And this right now, I can't find anything better to apply to my systems or our systems than the method that we're incorporated into them as of right now. And that is all because of the help that you've given me over the years. I mean, I don't have my credentials, but I can pretty much tell people how to maintain the chemistry of their reef aquarium very well because of your help.
I think you have more credentials than most. We're actually going to have this conversation about when you the question comes up, what's the best way? What's a better way than what I'm doing it right now? Instead of giving it a qualitative answer, we're actually going to look a little bit very briefly at some numbers here so that we can kind of quantify the difference between Kalkwasser application and calcium chloride application, and I'll give some general disclaimers before that. So you've just the last thing that I wanted to touch on in this area, you've told us what values you more or less keep the pH at now.
Mhm.
What prior to Kalkwasser incorporation, what were those values running in those systems more or less?
all of them were super suppressed. I mean, we were barely getting to 8.15 in a lot of the systems. And, it was going from morning before the lights came on, sometimes as low as 7.6, and then creeping up to the 8.15 at the peak of the day. And then just starting to go back down immediately. And the alkalinity consumption was so high because of all the extra carbonic acid that was in the system.
Right.
Like we've discussed before, it's like the little devil that you don't want in your aquarium. And if you use hydroxide, like we're using, it 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 neutralizes it, and it keeps your alkalinity more stable, and it allows the corals to utilize the carbonates and the calcium and other elements more efficiently. Um, there's so many things that have changed in our systems, from nuisance algae growth to disease. I mean, the biggest thing that we found with the pH when it was suppressed, we always had this white banding that would come in on echinophilias and mycediums and echinoporous chalices. And it surprised the heck out of me when a year into doing this that I had these kryptonite corals of mine that had these issues, that it just one day I'm looking in my sump, because the fun thing about me with my corals is I have so much, sometimes I don't look at them all on a daily basis. And when you have me personally, I'm that type of person that I can't stand looking at an issue that I know the coral's doomed, and I look at it, but I don't look at it daily. And the chalices that were in my sump were where I had this white banding that was going on and on some of them, and some of them had grown from little fragments. And they were nice big colonies with these big white bands going through them, and I know what's going to happen to them. I can cut that out of there, but it's going to just go into another area. And I just wrote those corals off, so I didn't look at them for months. And my one employee kept saying, "Did you go look at those chalices in the sump?" And I'm like, "Nope, haven't looked at them in a long time. You should go take a look at them." And I finally, after like a week or so of him saying that, I went and looked at him. I'm like, "What the hell happened to him?" I'm like, "Where's all the white banding? Where's all this issue? Where we had years of issues with chalices." And all I did was bring my pH up, and all of a sudden these corals are like growing like weeds. The white banding has gone away, and I have to attribute that to the fact that the CO2 levels are so low compared to what they used to be, and the pH is maintained, and it's not fluctuating. What is that? If it was at 7.6 to 8.15, that's 5.5 points
Fine.
per
Yeah.
day in swing. Now it doesn't go below 8.28. And if it goes to, in most systems, it doesn't go, well, the one system that's got the high alkalinity still, it goes to like 8.32. That's it. So I got like a 0.04 fluctuation on that system.
Mm.
The system right next to it, it has, it goes down to 8.28, but it goes up to like 8.36. And then as I keep going down the line, it's really weird because they all get, their peaks end up being higher as it gets farther and farther away from I-4. And that's just, maybe that's not really what's going on, but um, the fact that the one system is closest to the highway inside the building, of course, and then as they get farther and farther away, the pH peaks are always higher in those. I had a peak the other day that I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right. It was 8.55, and the pH in the morning before the lights came on was 8.28, and I'm going, how is it going to 8.55? So I had to go get my handheld pH meter and throw it in the system just to make sure that something didn't happen, where the pH probe on the apex was off. And sure enough, it said it was 8.49, and I'm fine if the pH probes are within a 0.05 mark. So it was 0.06. So I'm like, okay, it can't be that far, that much off. And then as it came down, I kept the pH probe in, and actually it was within 0.03 as the lights wound down and it was ramping down to the sunset effect. The pH came down to the 8.48 mark at one point, and I saw that my pH on the handheld was at 8.46. So I knew that there wasn't any issues with the pH probe on the apex. But that's the thing that's fascinating to me. What caused that spike that day? And I don't know if I would figure it out, because the only thing that I can attribute to is the fact that maybe there was less hands in the water. But then why doesn't it do that every Saturday and every Sunday when there's nobody putting their hands in the water? So again, variables that we're never going to figure out. And that's the other thing. Every house is different. Every person and their method of taking care of the aquarium is different. Is your tank closed? Is it, so many things that we can touch base on, Chris. We could talk for an episode every single time about the variables.
We're going to touch on those as we get along here. So, all right. So the intention there was to go ahead and get everyone primed on what sort
Yeah.
of impact Kalkwasser supplementation has had in your commercial coral grow out systems. And again, this is all meant to be a practical information, a pragmatic application of these principles. You mentioned getting away from Kalkwasser. I think there's a lot of social bias that exists, or social pressure, I should say, to conform to what someone else or a group of people are doing in their own systems. One thing that I encourage someone who's seriously into this to do is do your research. Check around, read some books on the topic. I cannot think of a better initial source than Charles Delbecq and Julian Sprung's Reef Aquarium series. If you don't own those, you should.
Yes.
If you were a reef aquarist,
Yes.
my Julian, or that chapter 1 or volume 1, volume 3 are my go-tos when I'm interested in just reading about something and seeing their perspectives. These books are, I don't know how old my copies are. I'm sure my volume 1 is a first edition. I don't know if there are multiple editions. I'm sure my
Right.
volume 3, I imagine my volume 3 is as well. I don't know if they ever reissued those.
I don't think you did.
Yeah, that information is something
So valuable.
to they really are. Yeah, there that's a user manual to your reef aquarium. And and especially in volume 3, Kalkwasser application is discussed at some great length. So we're not going to
Different
talk
though.
about,
It's
well,
different the way
there's
than what we do now. It's different.
um the volume 1 discussion was, I think, quite a bit different, a
Okay.
little bit less in depth. The volume 3 is pretty in depth.
Okay.
But there's a number of different methods of application that are talked about in there, but also the chemistry of Kalkwasser is discussed at some great length. We're not going to get into that in this video. That's not what this is all about. So, but moving along, we are going to talk about, all right, so what is Kalkwasser for those who are unaware? It begins with calcium hydroxide.